On day 9, we decided to go ahead and rent kimonos. I know it's super touristy, but we absolutely had to do it. It basically is just the trip of a lifetime, so it's really hard to not justify doing everything that we wanted to do. Well, we kind of made the mistake of not wearing it solely in the temple areas. We ended up going to a town a couple stops down because they had a sake museum, as well as a river tour that one of the bars that I went to, one of the barmen there recommended. And I really enjoyed drinking there, I was a little bit nervous at first drinking in Japan because I know that there's a lot of different social rules that foreigners just don't get. And I don't have too much social anxiety, but when you're in some place that's so different from what you're used to, it definitely hits you. As we were walking around, we basically went through another one of these covered halls, but one that was definitely less busy than the ones that we'd been to before. This was one that was obviously residential and not geared towards the big city, which we obviously weren't in anymore. The sake museum was only $5 or 500 yen, and it came with a little sake tasting cup, and you got to taste 3 different flavors at the end of the tour. So we got to read through, or at least look at, a lot of memorabilia for sake production, what the old bottles used to look like, what tools were used, how the type of distilleries changed over time. And it's really interesting to me because I like to homebrew. I've done a lot of homebrew wine in the past. So going into this was really interesting for me, and it was really cool to see all the different types of sake they had, especially because what I tried back home was basically warm vinegar flavored, and what I tried here definitely tastes much better. Even if you don't really like museums, I'd still recommend the sake museum here because it was very fun, very cheap, and it only took a few minutes to really walk through. So you don't even have to spend much of a day going around there. You can easily hit this in just a morning of walking around this area. After the basket weaving area, there was a garden outside that you could sit in, which I took advantage of to get a picture of my kimono on camera because I actually chose one of the cheapest ones there. I still really liked it, but it was warm and the shoes were not made for someone with humongous feet like me. So just keep that in mind if you are also like me and suffer for having large feet as a woman. At the end of the tour, you had 3 tokens, and you could choose which of the sake you wanted to drink based on sweetness and flavor. I tried a plum one that was really, really good. And like I said, I don't really care for sake, but it was delicious. And yeah, they basically had all that stuff for sale in the gift shop, so if you actually wanted any of it, you could bring it home. We finally stopped for a river tour, which was kind of hard to find because you had to go down steps from a bridge, and that's just not a place that I consider going typically. Like, it's just not a location that people think of. This was about 1,200 yen, so it was about 12-ish dollars. It wasn't very expensive. It was about an hour. You walked down here, there's a little boat station where you paid, and then you waited for the boat to come and get you. It would take you down the river to about the next gate, which did not open, and then you would go to a little museum about basically the gates that block the river and raise and lower the water. It was nice. There was one other group of tourists there. We were again the only people wearing kimonos, but it was a nice reprieve from the hustle and bustle of previous days. It was also just very pretty. The water was very nice. It smelled clean. The boats were really awesome. I really enjoyed this part of the experience. And then we actually ended up coming back to the area of Kyoto that we went to on our first day here. And this time we decided to stop in a little steampunk cafe, which was so small, so adorably decorated. I had a huge steampunk phase back when I was in high school. When we headed upstairs, the decorations were really cool. There was air conditioning, blessedly, as well. The food was a little bit overpriced, but nothing that was like extortionism. And it was just cool seeing the different recipes and the way that they really put an effort into making this place feel steampunk. I definitely would recommend going if you have the chance, just because, I mean, why not? If you're going to Japan, you should do everything, right? And if you're into cosplay, I mean, people do dress up and wear literally everything, so you could actually get away with it here if you ever wanted to do a photo shoot for this kind of thing. And I think now would be a good time to touch on what the hospitality was like while we were in Japan. Because I've traveled to, I think, about 6 or 7 countries, and for example, when I was in Paris, they acted like they did not like you there. Like they did not want you to be there. I know a little bit of French from high school and I know that I butcher it. But in some countries, they'll be like, wow, you tried. And it's kind of like watching a child stumble and trying to like take their first steps and they're just like, good enough. And in some countries, they give you the look of utter disgust of like, how dare you not know the language before you come visit us. I'd say Japan was very polite. They definitely made an effort. The hospitality was top-notch. Didn't have any issues of rude customer service anywhere. And I have to admit that I was a little bit worried about race because I've seen videos of, like, for example, teachers who come there and are of color or go to Korea or China and get treated, badly. So I was a little bit on edge about that. But overall, I think I didn't really have any issues. It was more so just a feeling on my part that I was doing things wrong because there's such strict social rules for certain things, like riding public transportation, getting in lines. Obviously, we're very obviously tourists, so that does work in the favor of people looking at you and going, this is a tourist, we're not going to judge them too harshly. But I do think it's definitely a country where you have to learn at least a couple phrases and be aware that you're going to be pointing and not knowing what you're eating sometimes. Because that was me a lot of the time. I would just eat stuff and I would not know what I was eating, which is fine for me because I don't have any allergies. But keep those in mind.